Welcome to the Compiled Podcast. This is a podcast when two programmers talk about anything and everything. My name is Nick Wu, and I'll be the host of this podcast. This week we're joined by Alex, who's also based in London, and a close friend of mine from university. And Alex, why don't you give us a short intro about yourself?
I'm from Scotland. I went to Edinburgh with Nick, like he said, and did undergrad in computer science, and I'm now starting my full-time software engineering role in 2 days' time in London, so I'm quite excited.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize. Oh yeah, it was in a couple of days. Yeah, how do you feel about that?
I'm quite excited, to be honest. Like, I'm sure maybe nerves or something will hit me on the day, but I think there's kind of an intro period anyway where you'll get to meet everybody and the technology stack. So it'll be I don't think it'll be too difficult to begin with. I think it'll be fun.
Okay. I think the last time we spoke, you were thinking about adding some stuff into your wardrobe, right? for work.
Yeah. So I went and got a whole bunch of shirts, kind of more formal trousers, chinos. Really not really that formal to us, just chinos, but I wanted something somewhat business casual to wear to work. I didn't want to kind of just wear what I'd wear in and out of uni every day. I don't think that would kind of fly as well in the office. So yeah.
I always wear just t-shirts and everything.
Yeah. So, they told me that was appropriate, but I feel they have a client-facing side or a client-facing department as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel for the first week or something, I should make an effort to look smart, just in case I'm ever if I ever meet somebody in there. You wouldn't want a client to come in and there's a guy in a suit talking to a guy in t-shirt and jeans. So I feel just for the first week until I settle in, I'll make more effort for sure.
That's a good point. I'll probably buy some more clothes for myself as well, because I'm starting in about 3 weeks. So
yeah, you've still got some time.
Cool. So that being said, we're going to move down to the speed run. This is the section where we ask a series of questions, short questions to our guests, so then the audience can know a little bit about you, and it sort of identifies you where sort of your niche is in terms of as a programmer. Cool. There are 6 questions. I'm just going to fire them off to you. Are you ready?
Yep.
Cool. So here we go. Question 1: most favorite programming language?
Probably C++.
Ooh,
or
why?
JavaScript, TypeScript. I really like strongly typed languages, and which kind of goes against when I say I like JavaScript, but that's why I kind of I like JavaScript using TypeScript, but I like C++ specifically because it's strongly typed and because you have so much control over everything you're doing. So in a sense, maybe it's not actually C++ I like, but more C, or really old C++, because a lot of the work I did at uni was kind of related to using really low level languages to kind of understand hardware. So that's why I maybe like C++ more than say something like Java or Python, where you can build services or products quicker.
Cool. In case our audience, audience probably won't know, why don't you tell us a little bit about your university, your final project, so your honors project, which I think is based on a very low level cache performance.
Exactly that, actually. So Intel are kind of doing this, they're kind of releasing this processor, and I believe it's a very early stage implementation of eventually what will become an Intel graphics card. And so it's got loads of cores, but unlike NVIDIA, you don't need a special language to program on it. You can use C++, C, or Fortran. And so anyway, it's like any modern processor, it's really complicated the way the cache and the memory system works. It had this complex memory system on it. Basically, it had kind of its own inline RAM in a sense on chip, and then also just loads of caches and loads of cores. And so I was kind of testing and timing and measuring how long it takes to access a single piece of data or a single cache line in different areas of the chip from different cores, and also how much memory, what the bandwidth of the memory was. So, for example, how much data you could pull in like one access in a sense.
Yeah.
Using like vector instructions and stuff like that. So it was like, to be honest, I didn't really get results that were like super factual or concrete. A lot of my actual write-up was about the process and discoveries made along the way. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I did all these measurements and these were my results. It was like, I did these measurements, I ran into these problems, because there were so many problems, because everything that's going, you never really know what's going on in your processor. Like, but the whole point is that it's proprietary, and that's why there's, Intel and AMD have their own ones. And so it seems like, you might think you're doing something, and then like, 5 weeks before the dissertation is due, you read something somewhere completely unrelated to something you did ages ago, and you're like, oh gosh, that's like, that changes all my results. And then you make like 1 or 2 line change to your test suite or your code base, and then it's not like it takes a long time to run them all again, but like you never really know when you're done, because there's stuff you got to account for, like out of order execution, prefetching, and like stuff to do with like the TLB and everything like that. So it was kind of really complicated. And so using, like, I guess this is just to link this back to the quickfire question. That's kind of like why I like the low level languages, because they almost came like they were such an important part of that process. Like the theory of timing something is easy, but to understand the language and what it compiles down to and stuff like that was so important. And so I guess I had to love it. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do my project.
I think it draws a fair comparison to microbiologists when they look into the microscope, as in how things actually work in a lower scale, or in a more detailed context. And so for people like me who are obviously just looking at like cats and dogs in normal scale, we don't particularly go into that much detail, and in fact C is probably my least favorite.
I remember you said that.
So which leads to my second question: what's your least favorite programming language?
So 100%, when I started uni, I absolutely hated Python. I hated that the indentation mattered so much for like for loops and stuff. But, and this is kind of, maybe we'll get onto this later, in terms of preparing for jobs and stuff like that, I actually like really learned to love Python, because it's really got a place, at least for me, for like putting stuff together quickly, because it's really easy to implement stuff, and it supports like a lot of what you would call, I don't know, like, like sorting or like iterating, stuff like that is like super easy. And because it's untyped or weakly typed, you don't have to you don't really have to, it's not like you don't have to write really verbose syntax. So it used to be Python. Right now I'm not sure, maybe I don't know, maybe like C# or Java, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't really hate any programming language. I think they've all got a place somewhere, but I guess I'd still go for Python, because I really just don't like the indentation, and I'm a fan of strongly typed languages. So I'll still stick with Python, but I definitely don't dislike it as much as I used to.
I found in the past few episodes, people's least favorite is usually not. I think it's more down to a personal touch and feel kind of type. It's like when you don't like a car, and it's hard to articulate, but it's like it doesn't feel quite right to use it in certain ways, right?
And actually, like, I remember I watched your last podcast. I'll probably change my mind and go with PHP, actually, the same as the last guy. I really don't, and it's actually funny, like, when he was talking about it, I could really relate to. I just don't like what the syntax looks like. And I don't know if it's because I was too lazy to learn PHP frameworks, or actually I did. I think I used like Laravel, very briefly. But even still, like, I found my code like so messy, and like I don't know. I didn't like that. Or maybe like CSS would be another language I don't like. That's if that counts as a language, then CSS or PHP I think would be my answer, because they're both messy.
So I think this could be a good tie into the last episode where John came in. John has a very long history and experience in web, so he has deep hate for PHP, and he's actually I think he's a TypeScript guy as well. So
Is he? Yeah.
He introduced the Angular TypeScript framework to me, which I didn't get to adopt to after all, because I use Dart, so it's already
Angular. I think Dart's really nice as well. Not that I have that much experience, but Dart is really nice as well. So it's kind of
yeah, cool. Okay, let's move on to operating system: Windows, macOS, and Linux. I think you've used each one of these.
I've used them all. I mean, I grew up almost entirely on Windows, and then I stayed with Windows because I played games. And then at uni, I think before third year, I got a Mac after my first internship. And like no, that's not true. I had a Mac, I think after first year in uni. So in like 2013-14, I bought the 2008 MacBook, not even MacBook Pro. It was like the first metal
fake
MacBook.
One. Yeah, the fake one where you can stick the CD in.
Yeah, and like that thing sounds like it's like an airplane going along the runway when you like open it up in a lecture. So like I never used it in lectures, but it had the Unix command line, and I think at the time I bought it, it was on Yosemite, and so they'd done like a whole bunch of performance improvements for Safari, and so Safari was like enough. I just used Safari and then the terminal for like all my work basically, and then I think like a text editor or something at the time. But that was like more than enough for my work. But then after my internship, I could afford like one of the new 2017 MacBook Pros, and so I used that. But then for my dissertation, I used a lot of Linux because I was doing tests with hardware. I wanted to like test my results or test my tests even on different hardware. So running it, for example, on like the test chip that I was supposed to be benchmarking was one system. Then I tried on my laptop, and then I had my desktop. So on my desktop, I've actually always had Linux on my desktop, but I would never really use it because I had my laptop. So I guess my favorite's still Mac, but Mac and then Linux or Unix based.
There's a tight draw between macOS and Linux.
Yeah, I mean Mac is just like it's like so user friendly. But then you get the benefits for like in development and stuff like that. Like you got the command line. It's easy. Like it's a familiar environment given that we used Linux on the school machines, basically. Yeah,
exactly. Cool. Let's move on to this. This might have been this question really doesn't repeat well in today's audience. What's your take on spaces versus tabs?
So I actually had there's a funny story to I got asked this question when I was in the Apple store getting my MacBook repaired. The guy that was serving me was a CS student, and he was asking me like, oh, like what are you a student? And I was like, yeah, computer science. And he was like, oh, me too. And he was like, the first thing he asked me was tabs or spaces, and I actually don't even have an answer because I always used to press tabs in IDEs, but I'm pretty sure it was populating spaces but then when I had to use Python, I was like, these tabs are screwing up my whole program. So I switched to like pressing spacebar 4 times. And then when I started using Vim, spacebar 4 times as well. But now that I use IDEs, again, I'm pressing tab. But I'm pretty sure it's all just spaces. I'm pretty sure whenever I press tab, it's getting converted to spaces.
Oh, okay.
So is the question tabs or spaces? Is that asking, do you press spacebar or do you press tab?
Do you press tab or do you press spaces? Yeah. I mean,
so I've done a bit of both. It depends what I'm working with, I guess. But if I had to choose one, I guess I'd go for tabs.
That's a very well answer to not make any enemies.
Yeah, exactly. What do you use?
I prefer to not say.
Okay, yeah.
But I think I've in terms of using what key, I've always used the tab key because it's easier to reach with the pinky.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one press, right? It's one press versus 2 or 4 on the spacebar.
Yeah, so. And also I think nowadays a lot of the IDEs does the formatting for you. So when you press enter, it will know where to indent it to for you in the next line. So you don't necessarily have to worry about that. So no matter where you are in the in this fight, do not hate me because I have no bones in this fight.
Yeah.
Cool. And then next question is favorite IDE. I think this is a bit of a redundant one. Do you have a favorite IDE?
Yeah, I mean, like, probably Visual Studio Code or Vim. Yeah.
Oh, you use Vim
I had to use Vim for my whole project. So I didn't really have to, but I chose to because I was SSHing into machines. So using Vim was really Vim or Nano, anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I when you say you use Vim, I was thinking more like a pro Vim user with like lots of config and everything.
Oh no, I don't have that. Like, to be honest, most of my usage of Vim was writing stuff down in like Visual Studio Code and then copying it and pasting it into Vim and then doing escape : WQ. That was most of my usage. But I did end up. I learned some of the shortcuts for like deleting words or deleting lines, like little things like that, just so I could get by. But I'm definitely not a pro user. But I like it because I kind of like have a sort of like an appreciation for anything on the command line. I think it all looks kind of cool, so I like it for that. But I don't. Yeah. I'm not a pro of it by any means.
Yeah, I've not used Vim that much. Just editing website config or stuff like that. But I've seen like pro users when I was working, and it's just amazing watching them work.
It's so cool. I know. I wish I was that good.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Favorite TV show?
I honestly I don't watch any TV whatsoever.
Sorry. This is the old version of the question. Favorite like show in general, like includes internet shows.
I know you watch on YouTube. I think it's Coding Tech. I always forget the name, but I watch them sometimes on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Other than that, like the stuff that I always watch is mainly like Dota 2 videos, to be honest.
Okay. So like gaming.
But like I don't really watch or play games that much at all anymore. But I always watch like Dota 2, and there's like a big tournament going on this weekend, so I've been watching that.
Yeah, I thought I've like started to enjoy watching other people play right now.
Yeah,
like it's not to me. It's not really about what happens in the game. It's more like just if you find a YouTuber or a gamer you like, it's more like just looking at their reactions when things happen. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's actually so much less stressful than actually playing the game.
Exactly.
Cause you're not pressured to not make a mistake or make the right play. You know.
Yeah. If anything, you're hoping that they don't go well, and then you get to see whatever reaction they throw out to see the saltiness.
Exactly.
Okay. Last question. What's your dream job?
I know the previous podcast you said it could be anything. Doesn't have to be tech.
No, it doesn't.
I probably say I actually really like tech, and I find it quite fulfilling, or like programming and software development. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, it's really cliche to say want to be an actor or something. I don't think not that I would want to be an actor, but like I guess it would be cool to start my own company, or like see a business idea through from start to finish. That I really believed in. That would be cool, even if I wasn't like a main developer. That would be nice, or I'd love to be like a tech lead for a business idea, but I don't think I have the experience that would allow me to do it yet. Like I don't have the tools, but that would be really fun.
Yet.
I think
not yet, but you know,
not yet. No.
Yeah. We've got more years
time,
to come.
Yeah.
Cool. So that is our speed run. I hope our audience get to know you a bit more now. Hopefully. Let's move down to our main topic, which is getting your first developer job. I think this will be a bit more useful than the last two episodes where we just talk about like what you should do on the side. This actually ties into your actual career as a developer.
Yeah.
Cool. So before we get into the tips and or the little tricks that we use, why don't you tell us a bit about your first development job? I think it was an internship, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, first and second year of uni, I didn't really have. I didn't think at all about internships. It didn't really even. I mean, it crossed my mind, but I thought, oh, internships are what you get like at the end of uni. I shouldn't be thinking about it now, which I think was both right and wrong. But my first job was an internship after third year. So I think during my third year of uni, I really started enjoying all my courses more. And I felt like, like this summer I'm going to get paid work doing something that I find interesting. I remember I spent so long applying for loads of internships. And to be honest, I don't know if my CV was bad or what, but I tend to not really get that many replies. And if I did, I would maybe have like one or two interviews, and like the process would be dragged out over a very long time, and I maybe wouldn't get it. And then this one company that I did work for, which was actually a really nice company to work for, was called Cal, and they I actually failed but I didn't get the
cow as in the animal.
Like KAL.
Oh, KAL. Okay, I thought it was cow, like the animal.
Cow. No.
Okay. No, sorry, go.
Yeah. And then so I didn't make it past like the final stage of the process, or they picked somebody else over me. And then I think about maybe a couple of months before the end of semester, they emailed me again saying that one of their other interns had fallen through, and that would I still like to intern. And I was like, yeah, of course I would love to. And so I ended up getting the intern there, and I think that was probably very important in helping me decide what it is that I do or do not want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can talk about like, do you want me to talk about like how it was relevant to getting my first job, or just what my experience was like in my internship?
Yeah, sure. So you did that internship in your third year, which is the summer before your graduation.
Yeah, so literally last year.
Okay, and literally last year. And then after the internship, I presume you started doing job hunting for full time. So why don't you tell us a bit
my
about
internship actually went really well, and they offered me a returning offer. But seeing that I was from Edinburgh and had went to school and then studied at university all through in Edinburgh my whole life, I was like, I'm not sure if I want to like start my career here. I feel like I really need to get out and live somewhere else. And so, although like I enjoyed what I was doing, and like it was fulfilling, and the people were really nice to work with, I kind of just said like, can I get back to you later on the offer, basically. And I went on to uni, and so went to uni, and I probably started applying for jobs straight away at the start of the academic year, before the project and stuff started getting in the way.
Yeah.
And there was like one company that I applied for, and like I said, like, look, I appreciate it's like a year away, or almost a year away until I would be starting employment, but I'm going to be graduating. I'm really interested in a job at this company. Like, would you be willing to like take a CV or whatnot? And they said like, they were kind of really wishy-washy about it. They didn't really get back to me. They did get back to me, and they said like, yeah, I'm not the recruiting person from HR. I'll get them to email you. And then like a month later, they emailed me asking me if I'm interested in doing part-time. And I was like, not really. Like, I've got my project and stuff to do this year, but I'd be really interested once I graduate. And they never even replied to me after that. So I kind of wrote them off.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously applied to like all the big companies like Facebook, Google, and all that. And I felt like I'd applied for the wrong job. I applied for a job at Facebook, and I got the automatic coding test. And it wasn't like an automatic coding test at all. It was like a quiz on the Unix command line, but specifically to do with networking. So how to like sniff packets and stuff like that. And TCP and stuff. And I was like, I don't know how to do any of this. And they acknowledged, they said, although it would be possible to Google the answers for these questions, you shouldn't, because if you can't get past this stage, you won't get past the next. So I was like, well, I'm not going to Google it. I'm not going to like kid myself on, right? And so I didn't make it past that stage, which I was kind of like disappointed about. But at the same time, it felt like, gosh, if that's what like the first stage of the interview process is like, I wouldn't want to like make it further and embarrass myself, or like just like get down about it. So I was kind of like, okay, I'll take that in my stride. And then I applied for like a couple of other, I applied for loads of places, but a couple of other places that stand out. One of them gave me like a take-home assignment, and it was to write it was a very loose specification. It just said like, write a program for recommending events to go to. So there'd be a database full of events.
Okay, so it's more practical than...
Yeah, exactly. And it said like it should only take you like 2 to 3 hours at most. And it said like, write something that will recommend events based on your location, like your distance from them. So I thought like, oh, this coding test is testing like your knowledge of like algorithms and data structures as to how you will efficiently, go through a data set and determine which pieces of data are of interest. So I wrote like a kind of like a wee command line application that would just list the events which were closest to you, and then like kind of plot them on like this crudely drawn like 2D grid. And so I submit that, and I didn't hear from them for like ages, and then they finally got back to me like months later, and they were really their feedback was really terrible. I thought I think the first thing they said to me was like, we felt like you didn't really put any effort into it, and I was like,
oh,
you told
man,
me to do
come
like
on.
I was like, you told me to do a 2 or 3 hour assignment, and I probably spent like 3 or 4 hours on it, and like I didn't really. I was like, oh, I'm like sorry to hear that. What were you like expecting? And they're like, oh well, other applicants like put together like a web app where you could like visualize it on Google Maps and stuff like that, and I was like, oh my god, like I was like, okay, well, fair enough, like that's a lot better than what I did, but like I just couldn't have done that in 2 to 3 hours like that. I'm sorry, and that was kind of like the end of it with them. So that was kind of disappointing. And then in terms of like, I applied for loads of places, but I feel like I don't know. I think we'll get onto it and discuss it more. But like, I feel like the whole interview process is kind of it's not perfect, but I don't know really if there's anything better that can be done about it. Like, I don't know. You applied for a few places as well, didn't you? Yeah, I remember you told me you applied to Improbable.
So yeah. my before I got into the full-time stuff, I started doing internships very early. So once I started university, I started thinking about that, mostly because I had nothing planned for the summer. I didn't want to travel too much. So, but I still, if my mom and dad's listening, I love you all, but it's just a hassle to travel for me. So I started doing applications for internships in my first year, which isn't quite as popular among all of us. And sure enough, I got turned down, I believe 11 times. Quite harshly actually. Some of the replies I've got are not, as you said, they don't really treat you well all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of,
and so come February of my first year, I was pretty desperate, and I was like, probably won't happen, since most of the internship positions are not already gone. I was whining to a friend the other day, and she was happening to be applying to Google for a full-time position because she's like a couple of years older than me. So she gave me an email to a recruiter who I contacted and put up, and then they put up a interview just to interview. And what I did was I basically ditched uni for about a month. I think you didn't know me that well at the time.
I didn't know you. I mean, I think I knew Jasper.
Yeah, so if you ask Jasper,
first year, but I didn't know you.
Yeah, if you ask Jasper, he'll know. There's about a month when I disappeared from everybody's life. Locked myself in my dorm room, not cell. And just really putting a lot of effort in prepping for the interview, and I was lucky enough to pass it and get an internship with Google in my first year. And
that's really impressive.
And after that, they've always given me return offers for further interviews, and lucky enough for a full-time position, which I will be starting in 3 weeks. And to the Improbable stuff, so Improbable is a different story. I started applying for full-time jobs because I wasn't hearing from Google last September. I wasn't hearing from them just yet. So I thought maybe I need to apply for other places as well. So I did. So I did a bunch of other companies, most of whom didn't quite get back to me or didn't get back in time. The one that I had constant contact with was Improbable, a startup based in London, and they actually sponsored me to come to London for a full day of on-site interview, which was probably the hardest day of my life. And and after that, I was lucky enough to get an offer from them as well. But at the time, so I had 2 standing offers, and I sort of weighed them back and forth and talked to a couple of friends. Finally decided to at this moment it would be better to stay with Google, and we'll see if things change in a couple of years. So that's basically what the past like 4 years of my life is.
Yeah.
So I think we want to move down to sort of general tips on job hunting, which I think I'll open with this. So I think one of the biggest tips you can have is I don't know what's the good way to put this, but the way I would put it is just have no shame to apply to literally anything like this. I had no clue about when I was turned down in my first year for a software company in Edinburgh, which was about like 12 people, and I thought, I'm not gonna I'm probably just not good enough for any jobs. So then when I was applying for Google, I was thinking this must have been the joke, and because that's literally what it is. I was whining, and this person had contact with a recruiter, and in my mind I was like, yeah, what the hell? I'm already turned down 11 times. Let's make it a dozen. So
I know.
So I think that resonates with you as well. That
for sure.
A lot of the times you.
I don't think.
Go ahead.
I don't think getting rejected from a job is a big deal whatsoever. Like, I really don't. I think in the moment it can really feel like, gosh, like I should have seen that, or how did I not get that in an interview, or why did I say that? I meant to say this, or how did I forget that I studied for that, or how did I not study for that? Like, there's so many things you could go wrong, and like I don't think you should like ever like beat yourself up about an interview, and that's so much easier said than done in hindsight. And like, not that I was devastated by like interviews that went badly, but I know that there was interviews I had that went badly, or I felt like I should have performed better, and then they kind of like after a week or two they would reject me or just not reply at all, and so I was kind of like a bit disheartened. But I don't I think in hindsight, and it's obviously so much easier to say once you've already got a job, and a good job that you've secured, but like it's really like it's not a personal thing at all. I think there's a lot of people apply for these jobs, both qualified and not, and I think they have to find some way to like cut people off. The first line is obviously your CV. I would like not be surprised if my CV for some of my applications was never even seen by a living person. It probably went through a parser, they looked and they didn't find keywords that were important for the role or something like that, and so it just never landed in someone's inbox or never landed on someone's desk. And you know what? That's fine. Like, they'll get thousands of applications, especially the likes of like Google and stuff. Like, there's no way they don't have the manpower to get it all. And this kind of like ties into what I feel like the process is inevitably flawed. Like, not everybody can get 100% attention and 100% of the maybe the effort that, or the trial that they deserve. But like there's no way about it, and because of that, everybody does apply to every single job, which makes the problem worse, right? Because not only do companies have hard time dealing with everybody who wants that role specifically for what it is and because of who they are, but because they can't handle that, these people are like, well, I better broaden my horizons, or I better apply for more. And I think it's good and bad, because it means people get more experience interviewing, and I think that's like hugely important. I think interviewing is like not something that really ever comes naturally, and like the pressures of it. And then I think like, there's just this inherent problem where there's never going to be enough manpower, and I think it's part luck and part part experience and just trial and error.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different from people, from person to person. Brandon was here. Was in this episode. Not in this episode. In the first episode. When he was in the process of ironing out his final offer, his return offer from Google, and he had this interesting fact where he was heard that a Google recruiter only will spend about 20 seconds on a CV if he sees the CV. Like there will be countless times when the application never even made it to a person, as you said. So
and I don't blame them. Like, I really don't blame them. Their job will be hard.
The fact is, like, it is what it is. But what you can do, if you are in the process of getting a job, is don't be deterred by the big names and go for it. I mean, for sure. So there's nothing you like can't achieve, like, in a sense, like, and if people, like, it's like you got yourself best, like you got a job at Google in first year, which is like I would have literally thought that to be impossible, given how much experience you would have had at the time. But then like with a bit of maybe like help or guidance, like you said, from your friend who was able to get you in touch with a recruiter, to being able to study and prove yourself in an interview, and for it all to go like well enough for them to like you, like it's not impossible. And like there'll be, like, not to disrespect you in any way, there'll be people who applied for internships in their third year of uni who might have had more practical experience than you'd had in first year. And they might have never gotten an internship just because either they didn't apply to enough or they just got severely unlucky. It's hard to say. I mean, like, I think there's definitely people who have like really good CVs, like GitHub profiles and stuff that, and they've got a lot of experience. They've got a lot of experience interviewing, and maybe they've already faced a lot of failures and know why they fail and how to improve themselves, and they'll do well. And you can, like, there's like a subreddit called like CS careers or something like that, and like you see people on there all the time saying, like, talking as if it's like really easy to get a job in CS. Like, you just have to write a good CV and you just have to have good personal projects and you just apply and then you just get an interview. Like, they're handing interviews out left, right, and center. But I really don't believe that to be the case. I think that's people like tooting their own horn in a sense because they've done well, and I think it's like refreshing when you see somebody who's in a good job like yourself, or like it seemed like your previous guest, like, to be like humble about it in a sense, because I don't think it is something that everybody just in computer science just like they just walk into it and that's it, they've got a job. Like, they do their coursework, it's on their GitHub or something, and then they just send off some mediocre CV and that's a job. I really don't believe that to be the case for anybody. Which we'll talk about this in a bit, that sometimes there are a certain amount of hard working that you just cannot. I mean, like, it's hard to get a job, no matter what kind of job it is. Yeah. So. Any industry. We'll get into that in a bit. But before that, since we mentioned CV, I think you've had a bit more tips on this. Do you have any tips to someone who's applying for jobs and on the CV? Because that's the first thing that that recruiter might see, right?
So I mean, like, So I mean, like, my opinion or advice is by no means like any key to success in getting an interview or anything like that. But in my opinion, I think on your CV, like, like you say, if a Google recruiter is going to be looking at it for 20 seconds, it should have the most probably relevant information for the role at the top. So if you're applying for like internships or graduate roles, you probably want to put something about your degree at very close to the top. You probably want to put work experience that's relevant. I did a lot of reading online about what people should put in CVs specifically for like computer science careers. And if you've got internship experience and stuff like that, when you're stating that, people say you should put like statistical figures in like the description of the job. So don't just say something like, oh yeah, I worked at, this company and I used JavaScript and HTML and CSS to write web apps. Instead, people say something like, you should say something like, I used, JavaScript and CSS or whatever to redesign the website in order to, boost views on the website by some percentage. And like, that's I think, obviously that makes you look really great. If a recruiter picks up your CV and they're like, oh wow, in their last role, they boosted something by this percent or improved performance by this percent, then obviously you're going to look amazing. But I think even still, that's quite a hard thing to even get that information. Like, and as an intern, how likely is it that whatever you write will ever see like master branch or the production branch?
No,
right?
It's very. I think I'll say a few words about this specifically. In terms of previous. I'm looking at my CV right now, actually. So in terms of previous work experiences, it's hard for you to give a statistical evidence that of your that's the way to show impact, right? So if I manage to get 1,000 installs because of this particular feature, or like a couple more percentage in retention or something like that, it's I think it's very hard for intern to get that sort of statistics. Yeah. So
never mind just like actually create something that could produce those statistics, but even still, like how many like interns do you think go back to their previous employers or at the end of internship say, oh yeah, that feature that you pushed of mine, like, I don't know, a month ago or a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, could I just have some statistics on how the website traffic has changed since? Like, I don't really believe that like anybody really, maybe there's some people out there who have done like really incredible work on their internships.
Yeah.
But in my experience, albeit limited, I don't think there's many people get that much exposure in their internships.
Yeah, and also most employers wouldn't like these statistics are, I think, for some part of it private. So
yes, definitely. So
even if you know, or even if they tell you, you don't necessarily can put into your CV. So I think so I think one of the solutions that I found was to describe the work more in detail. So like for my internships, the internship I did most work, I just did a bullet point on roughly the project guideline, because I don't think you can go into that much detail, but you can talk vaguely about what product it is, definitely, right? Because that's publicly searchable. And also just vaguely into what your role is in that project.
What responsibilities you had as well. That's probably quite an important thing to include to show that you're mature and can take on a task of some reasonable size. It's not like you've just thrown together HTML page or something for internal use. Like I think it's probably also a good idea to include information about how you worked with other people on the project. Not like, oh, I used Git with my colleagues. Say something like, I would attend annual or like daily meetings or something to catch my coworkers up to speed. I don't know, whatever you did. Like, for example, in my internship, I was quite lucky that the work I was doing was kind of like, I don't really want to call it R&D because it's not like it was like some like super expensive top secret thing, but it was like kind of like this product that they were working on in their market that they kind of wanted me to almost like Frankenstein's together and like take existing software and kind of like just kind of like bash it together until it worked really. And so like I kind of like, I did it, and then I actually got the opportunity to like present my work over like a Skype call, and what the new product would be like, and like the tasks or the problems it solved, and the opportunities it would give to their customers. So I got the opportunity to do that. So I thought that was important to include in my CV because, a lot of people will go to internships and they'll do like programming, and like their programming skills will undoubtedly improve, but in terms of like your professional skills, it's maybe if you get the opportunity or you applied professional skills. I think that's probably important to include as well.
Yeah.
And also your enthusiasm towards your work. I think if there's anything that you should put in your CV, it should be like your enthusiasm towards your career.
Definitely, yeah. That's what that kind of leads to my point where, in your CV for programming experiences, I think it's definitely okay or even better to put in some of your personal projects, which we talked about in the last 2 episodes. So have a listen at that. So for me, I had 2 projects listed in my CV, which was done either personally or by through a contract. And then those stuff you can actually show some statistics. So for example, my personal project that I did at UNC, one of the statistics I shown was how many signups we've got and how many. So that project was a crowdsourcing tool to label images for machine learning. Like that's the way to generate the data set for machine learning. So one of the statistics you can show is during the time it has been running for about 2 weeks, we've gathered this amount of labeled images which can directly be used in a machine learning library. So that's the stuff that that objectively show that your work has value,
had an impact.
I would say if you have this sort of, this is definitely like not something you will have all the time, but if you do have it, it's very nice to
definitely include it, like you say.
Cool. Let's move down. So say your CV gets through the recruiter and you manage to land an interview. As I talked about before, when I did my interview, I disappeared from the society for a month, which in retrospect wasn't I don't think it is the way to go. So before we go into tips, do you have a particular routine of prepping for interviews that you used, or is there some sort of schedule you adopted throughout the years?
Actually, to be honest, I think I did what I think most people do. I studied the company a lot, if they had publicly information about what their product was, information about what technologies they use, maybe who their market is, if they have like a company culture that they are especially proud of. That stuff's really, really important, I think, going into an interview. I think if similarly with your CV, if you express a passion or a deep interest in your career or your career with a specific company or a specific role, they will be much more interested in you over somebody who's, full marks, everything, best internships possible, but really doesn't really care where they work. I think you'll get just as much of an opportunity as, the top student, basically. But when I was preparing for interviews, I brush up on, algorithms, data structures, bits and pieces that I hadn't done in a while. Like I'd never really done that much databases at all at uni, and I kind of gave myself a crash course on it. I think using HackerRank actually, and I gave myself a crash course on it in case it came up in an interview. Just kind of like you can kind of maybe tell from the role, like if your company does, web apps and services like that, brush up on technologies that the web use, in terms of like maybe like how they work or the pros and cons of each. I don't know, but yeah, you definitely need to do practice on like these whiteboard interview style questions, where they ask you to write down pseudocode that will balance
definitely
a binary tree or something like that. You need to do those for sure. Like you just have to do them. Like they're gonna come up at most places. There's places that specifically say they don't do like these whiteboarding interview techniques, and that's like a whole different topic as to how useful is an interview. And what kind of interviews are best suited for finding out talent, or how applicable someone is for a job. That's a different topic, but you can find if you try those and you find those, like I found those really like quite stressful, but at the same time, like I enjoyed kind of like the challenge of it or the understanding at the end of it. But if you're somebody who really does like you find those so hard and you feel like the pressure of it's too much, there's actually a whole GitHub repo, and it's just a big long markdown file full of companies that hire without whiteboarding practices. So if you really
I had no idea about that.
Maybe I can find it and you can put it in the description or something. But otherwise, you really have to brush up on these whiteboarding problems. You know, there's like LeetCode, HackerRank. There's all these websites you can do them on. You just got to do it. Really, like it's a bit of a shame, but you've just got to do it.
So from that point, I want to extend it a little bit more in terms of prepping for technical interviews, because they are the majority of all the interviews in terms of getting a technical job. So the way this works is I've done my fair share of interviews before, and I've also helped a couple of friends to prep their interviews. So I actually have a whole Google Doc of resources and stuff. So I won't talk about all of them. I will talk about the important ones, the essential ones. Definitely, first of all, you need to brush up your basics. That is basic algorithms like sorting, traversing, that sort of stuff, and data structures, trees, dictionaries, and graphs and whatnot. So the best way, but one of the best resources out there is a open source course. Oh, that's a mouthful. From MIT, called Introduction to Algorithms. To actually refresh every year to keep up with what's happening in the industry now. So they used to do redback trees, but they don't do it anymore because nobody is gonna ask you to write a redback tree. And then apart from there, it all comes down to actually practicing with these structures and algorithms. As you mentioned, LeetCode is I think I've always used LeetCode. I haven't used HackerRank that much to practice. There's also a website called careercup.com where you can find some of the questions that have been asked by people who broke their NDAs. I certainly haven't posted my questions before, so but there is a website for it. Some people have posted their questions, so
I never came across that.
So if you want to have a look, definitely check it out. And also, there's a book that's specifically tailored for this purpose called Crack the Coding Interview. I think that's the book that everybody goes for.
People saying CTCI is a Bible and stuff online.
So that is the book where it talk about how the process works in terms of like what happens and how like what you should expect at each stage. And most importantly, it has I think 150 or so example questions
practice ones,
with answers in the book. So literally, these are the questions that have been asked before from big tech companies, and it's a good practicing material to get the hang of how difficult is it going to be, and what sort of style it is, and so. And the best of all is it comes with answers, so you can always check yourself.
And I think the answers are good as well. Like if you get really stuck and you can't work it out, you can check. But I think it's important not just to check and go, oh, that's how you do it, and then move on. I think you check and then you go back and implement it yourself.
And also, for some of the questions, they are like for solutions, they will have 3 different algorithms that trade off between space and time. So, that. Something you can sort of further improve yourself on. And also doing this is important as well, doing a space and time analysis on algorithms. So once you like in the interview, sometimes once you've written the algorithm, the person will ask you, okay, what's the space complexity of this, what's the time complexity of this. So being able to analyze an existing algorithm and giving trade-off on maybe like how to implement a different in a different manner that saves more time, that saves more space. Those are something that's really going to lift your performance above the average. That might be a bit arrogant for me to say, but so that was the thing I think that is vaguely actually related to the jobs, because once you started working, you're not going to. It's very rarely you will be working on something from scratch. So what you will be dealing with is a legacy system code base, where you need to understand what other people have written before you.
Yeah, and its impact.
Yeah, and its impact on performance, and sometimes the implementation details. You may be able to like spot a glitch or a bug somewhere that wasn't noticed, and those are the stuff that companies really value. So being able to analyze code and give different sort of trade-off to existing code is also very good. And also there's this thing that I found recently called Code Kata, which was founded by the guy who wrote the Pragmatic Programs, which is also a very great book to read. So in there, it goes much more into the fundamentals on programming, like just like thinking about different trade-offs, thinking about different approaches, different trains of thought to a problem.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because there's always like almost always more than one solution.
Yes.
And like that kind of ties into, you also need to know like or need to have a good enough understanding of like the difference between
exactly.
Like I've forgotten what it's called, but like you can do like a recursive approach or
an iterative approach.
An iterative approach. That's it. Yeah. So you kind of need to. I remember I was fortunate enough to have good friends, and we did some interview prep together. And we did a binary tree prep question. Yep. And it was like, first of all, do it recursively, and then do it iteratively. And like very often, like the first way will be easier for that specific question, and then the second way will be harder, be it recursion or using iteration. But then there's also like pros and cons to recursion versus iteration. You should really know that kind of stuff as well. And although it might be like language specific, when I was interviewing, I think I quite often got asked about, for example, in C++, like I think the difference between a pointer and a reference and stuff like that. That's quite language specific, but you might, if you're applying with, you've got C++ as like your most used language.
Then
you probably want to know that, because if they see it as your most used language, to make sure you're not, telling lies, they might ask you language specific things. So no, if you're going to put something as a language well, you should probably know it well.
Yeah. Also, that kind of leads to the point where you should go into the details of the language and the libraries that you work. Also, like the little particularities in the languages. So I remember
the intricacies of it.
So a good example was when I was doing interview prep. When I was still in Google, so we had this other guy with me, and also a full-time employee that was doing mock interviews for us. And I remember one time I was shadowing him, and he was trying to use he was using Java, and I was trying to use a dictionary. It's called a map. Yeah, it's called a map in Java. And he was trying to put in a new entry, but he used add. So he did like something .add, that which is not the correct way in Java to do it. Yeah. So I think that's sort of a tip off to the people who knows that, okay, you're supposed, like, these are the stuff that you're supposed to know. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it kind of
it's like it. Yeah. If you're gonna say you probably should. I don't think an interviewer, if you do that multiple times to an interviewer might be like in his head he might be like, come on.
Yeah.
But if you say it one time and correct yourself, like, don't sweat about it. But like, just as long as you do know it, and you're confident that you know it, it'll come across right, I think.
Yeah, I think those are stuff like that sort of tips off. Like, objectively, they're not a big deal, but it sort of plays with...
It's about impressions.
Yeah,
as
it
well.
plays with into the head of the interviewers and be like, oh...
Yeah.
You know.
And the interviewers really split hairs over everything. Like there's such a fine line between every applicant in a sense. Like, I remember apparently I got rejected from a company because they said I took like a couple of minutes too long to solve, and it wasn't even like a coding puzzle. It was like this riddle, and I just thought like, that's such a fine thing to like decide over. But they literally like they have to decide over something. So
yeah, and
you should just like know what you're doing, know your stuff basically.
So I think my suggestions would be to do your homework on the particular language you're going to be using, know the intricacies in the language, right? How do you prevent memory leaks and that sort of stuff? Because like those are the stuff that actually can creep up in production systems, even for languages that have like for example in Java you have garbage collection and all that stuff, but sometimes if you're not careful you can still get memory leaks, and in time, especially in a live system, it builds up, and in time it can be quite costly to repair when something bad happens. So definitely they are careful in terms of trying not to get people to write more programs that can have leaks. So like I would say, put in some time to know the basics or know the ins and outs about the language, and also the basics of computer science, that is data structures and algorithms. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I for sure agree with you.
Cool.
And like, it's kind of an unrelated note, but like, I think it's always okay to ask. And ask before, like, oh, how can I best prepare for this interview? Because although these whiteboard questions are going to come up every time, like I said, those language specific questions I got in C++, the reason I was prepared and knew about them, I mean, I probably would have been able to get the answer on the spot anyway, but the reason I knew was because I said like, thanks for arranging the interview for me.
What should I prepare for?
I just, like, how can I best prepare for this interview? Can you give me any insight into what questions might come up or what I'm going to be interviewed on? And she said, like, standard algorithms and data structures and core computer science. But as the company uses primarily C++, there'll be some specific questions on C++. So know some implementation specifics. And another company I applied for that had the same kind of response, but also said like, for example, learning modern C++ features. And if you're familiar, I don't know if you are, but it's the stuff like smart pointers and interfaces and stuff like that. So like, and like at the time, I didn't know what any of that was. I wouldn't have even said I was good at C++ at all then. I only really knew, how to use it in the scope of my dissertation. But I looked it up and I studied it, and then I went to the interview, and then I knew it, and that was kind of, it went well. The interview went well. And so, just
definitely.
It's always okay to ask how to best prepare, I think. Like that's, and it shows you're also keen on the company and how you want to succeed. Yeah.
And my last point would be trying, I think I've always said this in like each episode, try to involve some other people as well. So in this case, you can try the best way I found to prep for technical interviews is to have a buddy and just mock interview each other. Yeah,
100% agree. Like, there's nothing more valuable than somebody to mock the interview for you as a practice, or just to give you like, if an interview, they'll often ask you to explain your thought process, because they don't necessarily expect you to arrive at the completed solution with everything worked out.
No.
In the time frame, they want to understand your train of thought more so than they want you to get the whole solution. And so practicing with a friend, and you obviously have to return the favor, but help you vocalize your thoughts and how you're tackling the problem, because that's quite an important part of the process.
Yeah, I've actually developed this this sort of routine that I use from time to time. While I was at Google, I was practicing with this guy called Scott, and what we did was we block out 3 hours of our Thursday afternoon, and it will be literally I interview him for an hour, and he interviewed me for an hour, and then we spend the rest of the time just discussing what went well and what didn't, and what we should like what each of us is good at and bad at. So definitely have someone in your position to go with you into this. I mean, it's a favor to them as well. So I like if you can find somebody with you to go over all of this. I've done this with friends all over the world. I've done this with people in Taiwan with like 12 hours apart, and so that's not, I mean, you don't always need to find someone like physically close to you. So definitely try to find a buddy and just go for, and also it's good for solidarity's sake. You're not like it.
Yeah, you don't want to coop yourself up too much.
I think that was the one of the biggest mistakes I made in my initial prep. Also at the time I didn't know anybody, so
yeah, I mean, and you were also in a kind of a unique position. You know, there wouldn't have been many people in first year looking to do the same thing as you were. So it's not like you had a lot of choice, or you could just, you could walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I know I don't really know you well, but do you want to study for interviews with me?" They'd probably be like, "What? I'm going to the pub tonight,"
Yeah, but I mean, I think like if you spend time to look for people, you'll always be able to find them. It just may be a bit harder in certain positions, but definitely
it's worth putting yourself out there. And
definitely
for sure.
And also, it's a good way to meet people. I've actually met a few friends like from this. So after, I think it was like the past after Christmas last year, I've already sort of settled in my job hunting, but some of my friends are still working on it, and they've got other friends that were doing the same as well. So I was happy to help some of them to prep the interviews, and got to know a couple of friends. So that was, I think, an added bonus.
No, it's a good social activity as well,
it's
in
a
sense.
Cool added bonus, and also it's a lot nicer for me to do that at the time, because I was already settled, so there was like absolutely zero pressure for me to do that. But even if you are in that sort of position, having it's not a colleague. It's having someone else to go through that with you.
But buddy is like you. I like the word you use, buddy.
Yeah,
I think that's
because I was in America when they come up with this idea, so that's the word they use. At the end of the episode, we always try to compile the talking points back to a list of essentials. So I think currently to get a new job, to get a job is especially your first job, it's definitely hard. You're going to hit a lot of bumps, and I think having that expectation on you before you start is a good thing, that you don't get too disappointed or too frustrated on things.
Yeah, don't get disheartened.
And realizing that, especially it's because it's your first job, you would have no previous experiences, or like very little experiences going in. So treat the whole interview process and all the thing as a learning experience to get to know the industry, get to know how actual programmers are like, or focus a bit more on the people and how they work, how they communicate. And lastly, I think I've always said this, just you don't have to no matter how hard it is, you don't always have to go through it all by yourself. Try to have friends, have people, try to talk about it. I actually blogged about this as well on my blog. Check it out. So definitely have a buddy or like some sort of connection to others as you go through this process, because now when both of us look back on what have happened, so like each of us will be like, oh, it is hard, but I'm glad I
in the end
got to go through all of that, and it turned out to be great. So like I've already I've had the job that I'm excited about, and things are they're not exactly how we planned it, but it worked out as we hoped. So
no, you hit the nail on the head there. I think especially with like not surround yourself, but find like-minded people, help each other, and like the rest will follow. Be enthusiastic, and in terms of like the interview process, I think it's not going to change anytime soon. So just get good at it and get good at it with friends, and it'll all work out.
I think the last point I will mention is there is a certain amount of grinding that's necessary. So once you're fit, like I've always felt this, especially when I'm prepping with other stuff going on in my life. So like having to work, and also or sometimes having to study for projects, and at the same time trying to prep for interviews. It's hard, and you'll get days when you just don't want to do it. But definitely realize that it doesn't come easy, and no jobs come easy, and you need to put in the sweat and put in the effort, and that kind of gets me through most of the time. So if you can't take it, bitch about it with your friends. So that's literally what I've done in my past year.
I agree.
Cool. Before we wrap up, we'd like to go into this last section called Pick and Pod, where if you've seen any good stuff recently in your life, or there's something you want to recommend to your audience, or if there's just something you want to promote about yourself. Alex, do you have anything to say?
Not really anything to promote. I mean, it kind of ties into when you asked about the TV stuff. If you're interested in like coding and maybe finding out a bit more about how it happens in industry, that YouTube channel, I think it's Coding Tech, then look that up, because they just handpick different talks from different developer events where you can just learn about different technologies and what work people are doing in industry, and it might be something interesting to watch to see what actually happens and what jobs you might be interested in. That's the only thing I would say.
Okay.
I would recommend.
Yeah, so Coding Tag YouTube channel would be the recommendation. For me this week, truthfully though, I've been very busy this week, and I haven't had much sort of other stuff going on personally. But I think if I can recommend anything, just drinking water. Just make sure you drink water, especially in the morning. It's a good way to start to
refresh yourself and get waking up. Day.
I'm literally phoning this one in. I don't know what to say.
It's literally fundamental to survival, yet we still have to recommend it.
Yeah. And I think that's it. We actually went very much beyond our allocated time, but whatever.
Sorry, I hope it's not Nightmare to edit.
It's fine. Thanks, Alex, for coming on to the show. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
we hope to get you back for a different topic at some point, and maybe we can extend, do a part 2 of this topic.
Especially if people have like questions about specifics. Yeah, because we covered like a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, and also
it is a huge topic. So
and also there's a lot that we didn't get to cover. So if you have any questions on the specifics on stuff, definitely let me know. I'll try to link the stuff that we talked about, like the websites and the books, as I can. But yeah, and with that, it's the end of another episode. If you have any suggestions on the episode, any comments on what we have talked about, or if you just have any topic that you want us to discuss, or if you want to be on the show, definitely reach out to me. And with that said, I'll see you guys in the next episode.